Ninjago is no stranger to retcons. There has been plenty over the last few years, and I have honestly covered a fair few of them, but there's basically an infinite potential with where a retcon could occur. And Season 4 Part 1 has fallen victim to the newest of the Ninjago retcons. As much as I do really like the season, of course it is susceptible to it, and this one has a fairly interesting implication if you do actually think about it. And of course, based off of the thumbnail, it is to do with the skull from Master of the Mountain Hazardua, and if I've pronounced that wrong, I am extremely sorry. But we have had some new information regarding what is basically one of the main villains from the 11-minute era, and how what we actually saw of the skull is actually not to what we actually knew. But there are some theories to get around it, of course. So in today's video, I will cover what has been retconned within this season, and go over what could actually be coming of it if you do look at it in a future sense, because like I said, there's actually a fair few things you could take from it. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let me talk about Ninjago's newest retcon. Now, when actually was the last time we saw Hazardua? Well, the time we actually saw it was at the end of Master of the Mountain, because in the most simple way possible, he kind of exploded. Cole utilized the power of the Spinjitzu burst to actually destroy the skull basically immediately, and we get to see the reaction to that destruction take place. King Vangelis is actually being reverted back to what he was before he took over from the skull. He's no longer the skull sorcerer, and it was the most definitive instance that showed that the skull was destroyed. There was no reason to believe that he'd survived that instance. We did actually get to see King Vangelis again in Crystallize, and again there was no mention of the skull whatsoever. There was no reason to believe that there was anything to do with Hazardua beyond the point of that instance of the Spinjitzu burst. But the thing is that come Dragon's Rise in Season 4, we actually get to see an interesting conversation take place between Jay and Rapton. And that conversation is them discussing how they went into Shintaro to steal an ancient cursed skull for some mystery buyer. There is no further mention of it in Dragon's Rising, and we have basically nothing to confirm anything else when it does come to the topic. But the thing is that mention of the skull completely retroactively fits the end of the 13th season. It completely changes the outcome because the implication is that the skull still exists. So was it destroyed, or was it actually not? Well, the thing is that there's a fair few ways that you could interpret this line from Jay. The thing is that the first one is that it's just a flat retcon. They just straight up changed the events of the end of season 13, and the skull actually survived and essentially went into hiding in Shintaro. The thing is that explanation isn't really the best. It just completely counteracts what we definitively saw on screen, and I honestly don't think Doc Wyatt would actually do that. The second way that you could explain away this line is that they're not actually referring to Hazardua. It's actually a completely different cursed skull within Shintaro, and that is what Jay and Rapton took. The thing is that also doesn't really work, because you have to then consider the idea that there was a second cursed skull that was never mentioned beforehand, and also this skull was never touched beyond the point of Dragon's Rising, and for some reason, some mystery buyer or King Vangelis himself actually knew about it and never took action about it otherwise. So it's another way to take a look at it, but again, it just doesn't really fit in any sort of way, because I feel like we would have actually have known about it. But then that actually does lead me to my third explanation, and what I could actually see happening when it does come to moving forward if they want to take advantage of this concept. And that is my belief that the spirit of Hazardua actually transcended the skull itself. Energy can never be destroyed, the souls always have to go somewhere, and this skull has now re-embodied itself in a new vessel, and that is actually what Jay and Rapton took. And I do think that would be a way to explain it away, whilst also keeping in line with what we actually saw in Master of the Mountain. But that then itself might lead you to the further question of, well, what would you actually do with this concept and why actually bring it up? Like I said, I feel like this line was somewhat intentional. I feel like they wouldn't really just drop that in because it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Of course, Dragon's Rise in Season 4 has a lot of callbacks to older Ninjago, but the difference between those instances and this instance is the fact that it completely changes something that we have got established. It's not a callback, it is a retcon, like I said. So it feels like they've done it intentionally, and I think I kind of understand why. So this actually does lead me into the theory in of itself. I think that they have retroactively brought the skull back as a mean to actually lean into some form of external media for Shintaro itself. I think Dragon's Rising is a very packed show, but the thing is that there's so much world, there's so much environment, and there's so many new things that they want to explore, but I don't think they're necessarily done with concepts like Shintaro in of itself. So if they bring back the skull essentially as a villain, and maybe even bring back King Vangelis, they can have an external media that covers the events of Shintaro during Dragon's Rising, and I think they're going to do it potentially as a comic. If they did Shintaro as a comic based series, it would give them so much opportunity to show so many characters that we've not seen in a while, like Queen Vanya or King Vangelis or the Upply. It would give them the opportunity to actually show what they've been doing during the events of Dragon's Rising. They could also then play with design concepts. If the skull is returned, they could do so many cool designs under the influence of Hazardua. They could have so many new locations for Shintaro. There are so many things that they could really get a hold of if they did actually want to go through with this idea, and it does really feel like they're going to. It does feel like they have some sort of intention with Shintaro because simply of the amount of times they've even brought it up. I think that's honestly one of the biggest things that have gone unsaid. For some reason, Shintaro is being brought up a lot in Season 4. We get it honestly a fair handful of times, and I really do feel like that is intentional. It honestly does feel like they're really bringing that back to our minds for a particular reason. I could be completely wrong, and that's completely fair enough, I'm only theorizing. But the thing is that with a season with so many callbacks, it feels like they're really leaning in on the Shintaro aspect, and with the fact that Ninjago are doing a load of external medias at the minute and loads of different time frames, loads of different locations within the comic based series, it does make sense that one of the most grand and one of the more interesting locations and one of the more popular locations at that is going to be used for a future comic series, and this does feel like the initial breadcrumb to really lead up to it. But here's the thing, I could ultimately be wrong, and I could just simply be looking too far into an offhanded line that we may never actually hear anything about again. But I do think it's fairly interesting that they did add this in. It feels very intentional, and they do bring a lot of attention to it. They could have done many things that would not have mattered whatsoever, but they specifically decided to retcon this skull. They specifically decided to bring it back off screen for whatever purpose. And I don't think that is a mistake whatsoever. I truly do think that they actually have something going on here that I don't think they want to reveal just yet. Like I said, it could be something to do with Dragon's Rising in of itself, or it could be something for an external media. I do think it plays really well into a comic based idea, but that is ultimately just me. But beside all of that, like I said, it could ultimately be nothing. But if there's one thing the Weavy channel knows what to do, it is to overanalyze the smallest thing possible. But on overall, I am just very curious to see if they're going to bring this up in any sort of capacity moving forward, because as someone who really likes Master of the Mountain, seeing Hazardor one more time would be really cool, but ultimately I don't want them to bring it back if it's going to be for nothing. But it just would be a shame if this line basically means nothing as well. We're kind of just in this really weird position where we just have to hope that this means something and it will also be good at the exact same time. But this is where I do want to pass it off to you guys, because I'm very curious to know what you think of this offhanded comment by Rapton and Jay. Because would you want to see its return? Would you want to see a comic-based series about Shintaro? Or would you rather them just leave it alone and just have it as a very weird retcon that they don't acknowledge again? There are many opportunities for this thing, and there's many opportunities for this offhanded line, and that is why I want to know what you think, because it's definitely got me thinking. But thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of you are absolute legends, and your support truly does mean the world to me. But like I said, that is about it for today, and take care. Okay, bye!